I worked at the same pizza place for over 9 years, but when new management started cutting corners, cutting my hours, and covering up a horrifying roach infestation, I took the ultimate revenge. I got the Department of Health to shut the entire place down and got every single manager fired. The air in the kitchen used to feel like home. 9 years. 9 years I had dedicated my life to that restaurant. A local pizza joint, nothing fancy, but it was my place. I knew the ovens, the recipes, the regulars, and the rhythm of the dinner rush better than I knew my own apartment layout. That kind of longevity, that kind of loyalty, it used to mean something. And then the new guard came in at IT wasn't a transition, it was an execution. They weren't interested in quality or tradition. They were interested in the bottom line, and only the bottom line. Suddenly, every supply order was questioned, every cleaning service scrutinized, and every standard procedure tossed out the window. They were cutting corners on everything. The first victims were the veterans, the old crew who knew better, who understood the proper way things were run. We were the walking, talking reminders of their incompetence, and they wanted us gone. One by one, our hours started shrinking. Mine too. After nearly a decade of reliable work, my weekly schedule went from stable and predictable to barely existent. It was a clear, calculated move to force us out without having to pay severance that I watched as the quality plummeted, and with it, the atmosphere. The place that was once a source of pride became a source of mounting anxiety. When my name was missing from the schedule for the second week in a row, I knew I had to act. But where could I go? HR was a ghost town, a joke of a department whose sole purpose was to protect the management, not the employees. Our formal complaints? They landed on deaf ears and were immediately shredded. It was clear that the new management, the people responsible for this chaos, had the full, unwavering favor of the higher-ups. If I wanted justice, I had to bypass the entire corporate structure. I had to go nuclear. A much bigger, much more horrifying problem had begun to emerge, one that was a direct result of their budget cuts to sanitation and maintenance. The restaurant was facing a burgeoning roach infestation. IT started subtly, maybe a quick flash in the corner of my eye. Then it became undeniable. It was disgusting, stomach-churning, and absolutely everywhere. Yet, I stayed quiet about the full extent of it. Why? Because I knew the score. If I reported the true scope of the problem internally, they wouldn't eliminate the roaches. They would eliminate me. They'd find a reason to fire me before the sun set that I did. However, try to report the isolated incidents, just to cover my own back. But every single time I mentioned seeing a pest, the manager would wave me off, sigh dramatically, and tell me to get back to work. There was no documentation, no log, and certainly no pest control call. Everything was swept under a greasy rug, kept secret to maintain their superficial performance numbers. Then came the final straw. The schedule for the third week dropped, and my name was still missing. That's it, I thought. 9 years of my life, gone, not with a thank you, but with a silent, disrespectful dismissal. The professional loyalty I had once felt completely evaporated, replaced by a cold, surgical fury. It was time for revenge. I knew exactly what I needed to do. This wasn't about getting my job back. This was about justice for every veteran they pushed out and for every customer they were knowingly exposing to filth. I carefully drafted an anonymous message to the city's Department of Health. I didn't just tell them the restaurant had roaches. I gave them a map. I told them precisely where to look and, more importantly, when to arrive. I knew the shift change. I knew when the back of the house was at its most chaotic, and I knew when the managers would be too distracted to properly hide the evidence that I detailed the unspeakable reality. I told them they would find roaches scurrying under the pizza prep line. I told them they would find them behind the leaky ice machine. And then I dropped the absolute horror show. I told them to look inside the cheese shakers, the ones sitting right on the customer tables. I told them the infestation was so dire, they were finding their way into the grated Parmesan, a detail so repulsive it guaranteed immediate action. And my revenge work, IT wasn't a subtle correction. It was a devastating earthquake. The Department of Health descended on the restaurant like a biblical plague. They found everything I promised and more. The subsequent report was brutal, the health code violations overwhelming. The ultimate humiliating result? The restaurant was shut down immediately and issued a catastrophic B health rating, a scarlet letter that would haunt them forever. But the most satisfying part of all? Seeing the fallout. The closure and the public health disaster were so spectacular that the blame couldn't be contained. The entire chain of command crumbled. The new managers who had cut corners and laughed off our complaints, fired. Their direct supervisors who enabled the cuts and ignored the HR complaints, fired. The managers, gone too. They all paid the price for prioritizing profit over public health and decency. They messed with my hours, they messed with my career, and they messed with the health of the community. Next time they think about mistreating a veteran employee, they'll remember the day their entire operation was flattened by one perfectly timed, perfectly placed anonymous tip. Second story, I just moved into a new apartment complex, but my neighbor's constant smoking on her patio kept ruining my fresh air and stinking up my entire apartment. After the leasing office failed to address the problem, I took matters into my own hands by blasting CeeLo Green's Forget You and loud dubstep at her until she retreated inside. The move felt like a fresh start. Florida, new apartment complex. I've lived in many over the years, and I'm used to the quirks of communal living. This particular complex, like most, has rules. No smoking inside the apartments, but patios are apparently fair game. I get it. I'm a former smoker myself. I understand the insidious grip of nicotine. It's an addiction, but the issue wasn't the addiction. It was the proximity to we had just hit a brief but glorious cold streak in Central Florida. That perfect low humidity air that makes you want to throw open every window and just breathe. I was thrilled, ready to save on the power bill and enjoy the rare, crisp freshness. My windows were wide open. The sliding glass door was cracked. Pure bliss. Then the smell, HIT was my neighbor to the left, an older woman, enjoying her cigarettes on her patio, which is her right technically, but her secondhand smoke wasn't politely drifting away. It was cascading directly into my living space. A thick, stale wave of noxious fumes poured through my openings, immediately assaulting the clean, cool air I was trying to enjoy. Everything started to stink. My curtains, the cushions, the very air itself, all permeated with the smell of old tobacco. Why first course of action was the reasonable one. I reached out to the leasing office. I explained the situation calmly, highlighting the conflict between my right to enjoy fresh, smoke-free air and her right to smoke. Their response was infuriatingly unhelpful. They confirmed that patios are designated smoking areas and, with a dismissive chuckle, suggested I purchase a fan to have blowing out of my apartment to lessen the smoke coming in. Only me, the victim of the fumes, was asked to invest money and energy to mitigate a problem caused by someone else's activity. I found the suggestion ludicrous, but I decided to give it a shot just to prove a point that IT didn't work. The fan only seemed to pull the smoke more efficiently toward its source.so. I followed up. This time, I offered a kind suggestion for the entire community, trying to appeal to their sense of social responsibility. I pointed out that secondhand smoke is, a documented carcinogen. I may have leaned into the drama a little there. Crucially, I offered them a reasonable solution used by my last apartment complex. Request the smokers to use a small fan on their patio to disperse their own smoke, preventing it from stagnating and entering other people's homes. It's a simple, fair courtesy that I got no reply. Cricket's 0.2 weeks went by. 2 weeks of constantly smelling cigarettes every evening, every time I dared to open the door. My couch, my fabric belongings, they all started to carry that offensive, clinging odor. I contacted the leasing office again today, reiterating that their initial fan suggestion was a failure and that the pervasive smell was now ruining my property. I specifically requested that they contact my neighbor and ask her to employ the use of a fan on her patio. Still silence. However, I did receive an email confirmation about a completed maintenance work order. I seized the opportunity, replying to that official thread, restating my request and my frustration. I've gone through multiple cans of air sanitizer spray, and my opinion stands. Suggesting I purchase multiple fans to keep other smoke out is frankly unacceptable if the smokers are not asked to take the same simple, courteous action. Finally, they responded, saying they will reach out to her. I desperately hope this is true. I just want to enjoy the cold Florida months ahead, like everyone else. But 10 minutes ago, the smell returned. That acrid, unmistakable odor wafted right through the slightly cracked sliding door. I snapped. The time for polite emails and administrative appeals was over. I grabbed my cell phone, stepped onto the patio, and maximized the volume. My course of action was swift, petty, and immensely satisfying. I played CeeLo Green's song, Forget You, and I sang along, loudly, aggressively, making sure my voice carried over the acoustic tiles of the complex. I focused my booming vocals on the parts that substitute the main lyrics with a very clear, very loud F asterisk 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 U. As the song ended, I immediately pivoted to a random, abrasive dubstep mix, the kind of music designed to irritate and overwhelm that was glorious. I was laughing so hard on the inside. A moment later, I heard the subtle clack of her sliding door closing. She retreated. I turned the music off and took a long, deep breath of the newly clearing, cool air. AITA for using weaponized music to force my inconsiderate neighbor inside. Maybe, but for now, the air is clean and my couch no longer smells like an ashtray. And that, to me, is victory.